Yes, good morning, good afternoon, good night, everyone. So I'm Julien Brajard, and today I will talk about machine learning. So it will be an introduction, a general introduction to machine learning, with a particular focus on how machine learning can be useful for physical / Earth system modeling problems. And especially this introduction will maybe give the first bricks to explain how machine learning and data assimilation can play together. But I will not go in detail into that. So I will first state the basics of machine learning. So in the second time, we can play with machine learning and data assimilation together. So I will post on the chat the link, the URL with where there is a practical exercise, but also there is the PDF of the presentation I will give today, and I will start to share my screen too. And okay, and so all these slides are on the GitHub repository I've just indicated in the chat, and which is recalled here in the title slide. And also I will try to make some stops from sometimes to answer a question if there is question on the Markdown web page. Okay, so let's start. So this course will be organized in two parts. So the first part is more like a general presentation, introduction of machine learning. And the second part will be a practical exercise on one particular example of how machine learning can be used for physical and Earth system modeling. I think the first part will last a bit more than an hour, so I will stop at noon today, but at noon. But we will reconvene at 1, and I will maybe finish the general introduction at 1 before going through the notebook. Okay. So can you also see my cursor? Yes. Okay. Yes. Thanks, Patrick. Also, these are two references. So there is plenty of references on machine learning. So there are two references that I found that are really clear and very that have a very practical perspective on machine learning. So one is more specific on deep learning. So I will talk a bit about deep learning. And the other one is really how you can use Python to do machine learning, some very standard machine learning algorithms. So this is a Python data science handbook. So this is the topics I will try to cover today. So I will start an introduction to explain what is machine learning, why is it useful, and why it is a good idea to apply it to physical modeling. Then I will just introduce some very generalities on machine learning, and I will try to give some focus in the next parts to parts that I find very important and essential in machine learning. So for some of you, it can be some thing you already know. So because I'm starting from scratch, I assume that you don't know machine learning, basically. And actually, you will see that maybe most of you know machine learning, even if they think they don't know machine learning. So I start with the introduction. So first, I try to replace machine learning into historical perspective and also the terms that are used. So machine learning actually that can be seen as a subtopic of artificial intelligence. So in this slide, the artificial intelligence is is placed in the late 40s, but actually this is a topic which has been thought for a very long time and much longer than the 50s. But yeah, there were some first very theoretical and practical results in the 50s that makes that we can start the artificial intelligence field here. So then you have more specifically machine learning. So it's more computational artificial intelligence. When you just I will explain a bit more what it is. And since 10 years now, you have deep learning, which is also a subtopic of machine learning, which is basically machine learning with very big machines, if you want. So yeah, so if you do deep learning, it means that you do some flavor of machine learning, and if you do machine learning, it means that you do some flavor of artificial intelligence. And sometimes artificial intelligence and machine learning are synonyms, because most of artificial intelligence progress today are in the machine learning part. So this field is very active lately. So two illustration of that. If you look at the proportion of AI, so artificial intelligence publication with respect with all the publication of the scientific publication in the world, you see that 1% the machine learning AI publication has go from 1% of the publication to more than 2%. So they are double their proportions of publication. And this double proportion is in the context of increasing number of publications. So there is a huge increase of publication regarding AI. And within AI, you have several topics. And the more important topics which produce publications are, so this is an archive code for those who are familiar with this. So CSCV mean computer vision. So this is computer vision application. I will talk a bit about that later on. And LG, this is a machine learning section of computer science. And there is also machine learning sections in the statistical section, machine learning topic in the statistical section. So people are more publishing in the computer science area theme. Okay, so this is a very, very active field. And I will take 3 examples of achievements of machine learning. So you have seen that a lot of publications are in computer vision section. So computer vision is basically, and roughly, this is just processing some images. So there is 4 main problems that you can do with processing images in computer vision. So the first problem is classification. So you show an image and you should classify this image. So say what this image is. So here, for example, you have an image of a cat and you expect that your system tells you that this is a cat. You can also do a bit more than that and add localization. So here localization is not the same has not the same meaning as the localization we have talked about in data simulation, even if it's still related to a specific area of the image. But here you say that you want to localize where the cat is on the image. You can have also object detection. So you have an image and you can detect several classes in this image. So you have here 2 cats, 1 dog, and 1 duck. And you can have a segmentation, which is the more challenging task because you want to detect all the objects in the image and you want to detect which pixels are belonging to the object and which pixels are belonging to other objects. And so there has been a challenge that I've run for this computer vision problem. So you have a huge image data set. And basically, the challenge was, okay, are you able to classify those images? So there are dozens of classes that have been decided. So cat, dog, car, forest. I don't know. I don't know all the classes, but and you just need to give an algorithm that is able to classify those images. And until the end of the challenge, so this specific challenge has ended in 2016 or maybe 2017. This is the result that have been obtained. So here you have the classification error of the best algorithm for each year. So in 2010, you have an error of 28%. So I mean 20% of the time you give the wrong class. So you give a dog while it is a cat, for example. You have a small progress in 2011, progress by 2%. And there is like a huge progress in 2012 because you go from 26% to 16%. And mostly this progress is due to the change of algorithms. So in 2010 and 2011, they were using traditional machine learning algorithms. It was still machine learning, but it was traditional machine learning algorithm. And in 2012, this is AlexNet. This is a deep learning algorithm. And you see that it has made a huge difference. So it's also explained why deep learning is so used in computer vision and to image processing in general. And since 2012, there has been a lot of progress. And there will even you even have a point. So in 2015, when the machine was more accurate than human to classify images. Even though I'm not really sure what it means, because the images was classified by human at first to give the performance. But I think that this has been classified by a group of people. So some people make individually, you make 5% of error when classifying those images. Okay. Second example of machine learning and deep learning achievement is machine translation. So machine translation is basically translated text from a language to another language. And there are some benchmarks on that also. And you see that machine learning translation service have increased a lot in the last year. And especially the commercial translation service. So the translation you have, for example, in Google Translate or any system of translation, they are using deep learning. And this progress has been very, very, very fast because first deep learning algorithm was in 2013 and 4 years, basically 4 years after, most of the systems was made by deep learning. So this is an impressive also achievement of machine learning. And I guess you have heard of the third achievement, the third example of achievement of machine learning, which is playing games. So this is the traditional machine learning field of application, playing games. And you know that or you might know that in 1997, there is the first impressive thing that Deep Blue, which is a computer, defeats Kasparov at chess. In that time, there was not much machine learning in the Deep Blue. It was mostly algorithms and power of computation. But then in 2016, machine learning algorithm beat the champion of Go, and it was a bit a surprise for a lot of specialists because the general thinking was that the Go game was will be dominated by human for some years still, and it was a surprise that so fast machine learning, and in this case deep learning, would be able to beat a human in Go. And in 2017 there was a new version of AlphaGo that outperformed the previous version, and that learns the first version has been trained by a lot of Go real games. But in 2017, you only give the rules of the game, and the algorithm trained by itself how to be very good. So Go is a full knowledge game, so you know everything of the game. There is no unknown, and there is no probability in Go. Everything is known. But there are also applications of deep learning where some of things are unknown, like poker, where you don't know, of course, you don't know the game of your opponent. And even here, machine learning has done some very impressive achievement. There are also some attempts to use artificial intelligence for other things like art. So this is a paint or an image that have been produced by a machine learning algorithm. So yeah, basically this algorithm, you have feed the algorithm with a lot of painting of the history of painting, and it's a special type of machine learning algorithm which is called a generator. So you ask the algorithm to generate some painting, and this is the result. So I don't know if you like it or not, but it has been sold it was a very expensive paint actually, and it has been done by a machine, even though the machine was trained by human, and maybe the outcome has been selected by human too. So it's not fully maybe it's not fully automatic here. Okay, so I hope that you are convinced that there is quite some achievements of machine learning and deep learning lately, and I will try to give what are the reasons for that. Why is it so efficient? And here we are in an area where there is a lot of subjectivity. So I will give what are the reasons, what I think are the reasons for those achievements. I guess I'm not the only one to think that. So it's not just a personal view, but there is a subjectivity because nobody knows for sure what are the reasons of why it works. There is no consensus on that. But I think that the first reason that there is some good achievement for machine learning is that there is in the year 2000 and 2010, there was an increasing of the size and the quality of the data sets. So this is just an example here. You see the increasing of the size of Wikipedia article from 2001 till 2020. So it has increased exponentially. And I guess you can take a lot of data set and you will see that it increased like that. The second reason is that there were a lot of progress in computing resources, and especially the area of GPUs, which stand for graphical processor unit, which allows you to do a lot of computation in parallel. And you see here that the power of computation of GPUs have increased a lot, and much more than CPUs actually, which are the standard and traditional computer processor unit. And machine learning algorithm and deep learning algorithm are very well fitted for GPUs and to make computation on GPUs. So I think this power of computation is one of the reasons also of the progress. Of course, there are also some scientific and fundamental progress in algorithm. And especially for image processing, there are this convolutional neural network and this understanding of algorithms that also are a reason of progress. Here, there is an example of machine learning that is used to merge the content of an image and basically the texture of another image. And so you give to the algorithm this bird in input and this fire image in input, and the output is like a merge of those two images. And you can achieve that because you have an understanding of what have been learned by the machine learning algorithm. There are also other reasons. I think also a reason is that in machine learning community, there are some software which are very efficient, but not only efficient, that are very easy to use. And that and you can now do GPUs, cloud computing in 5 minutes using those software. So TensorFlow, Keras, and PyTorch. And I think this cheap access to new computations they are a reason also for the success of machine learning. And there is another reason, and I think that it's a bit subjective here, but it is the culture in machine learning, which is a lot about free software and open data. And I think that has helped a lot to make some huge progress in machine learning. So now most of machine learning scientific articles, they are giving their code on GitHub freely. Most of the articles are published just 2 days after they have written on arXiv. And so it's very quick, it's very efficient. And also it enables to share a lot the results and the software. So I will take I will take a quick pause here to see if there are questions in the. Okay, no questions so far. So I guess everything's clear so far. It was more a general introduction on machine learning. So don't hesitate to put the question on the Markdown webpage if you want. Okay, so now I will try to convince you that it's a good idea to apply machine learning to physical and Earth system modeling. When I say it is a good idea, I don't say that you should apply machine learning for everything in Earth system modeling, but I think there are some problems in Earth system modeling where you could leverage on machine learning algorithm. So here, I said that one of the reasons of the achievement of deep learning and machine learning was the increasing number of data in quantity and in quality. And actually in Earth system science, this is something we have. We have an increasing number of data. Here is just an example. You have the number of satellites that observe the Earth from the late, for the mid 70s until today, basically. And you see there is like here again, you have the same kind of curve than for Wikipedia articles. You have a huge increasing of number of data, of satellite data. And so this is a playground, a natural playground for machine learning when you have this quantity of data. First, because machine learnings like to have a lot of data to be trained on. And also because when you have a big number of data or huge data set, it's also difficult to handle that manually or just by maybe some standard techniques or with Excel spreadsheet, for example. So you need maybe more complex algorithm. And also, I said that machine learning was good at processing images, and we have some images with highly significant spatial patterns in physical science and in Earth system science. Here, this is an example of the sea surface temperature in North Atlantic, so the Gulf Stream. And you see that there are some, personally, I find this very, very beautiful, but this is all the mesoscale activities of the surface current here that explain the patterns here you see in this image. So this is a satellite image of the sea surface temperature. So when you see this kind of image, you see, okay, there are significant patterns, there are complex patterns. So that could be a good idea to use machine learning for some of the problems. Okay, but this is very generally why there is why you could use machine learning. Of course, you need to have problems that can be addressed by machine learning. But I will just make a point about why still Earth system modeling and physical modeling is specific, and you cannot apply all the machine learning algorithm just exactly the same algorithm that have been applied to recognize cat and dogs, for example. And I make my point by showing you those two curves. So one of the curves on the left here is the evolution of the NASDAQ in over 10 years until 2019. And so this is like trade market things. I don't know anything about that. So I hope you don't have some question. You don't have any question on that. And here you have the evolution of the global average temperature from the mid 19th century until not today, until five years ago. So I don't learn you anything by telling you that the global average temperature is increasing, but it's not increasing simply. There are some variability of this increasing, and if you look at those two curves, you can say, okay, this is very similar data. You have some trends, you have some large scale variability. So just be careful that the time scale is not the same here. But still, you have some more large scale variability. You have small noise, and you have a very quick variability. But I argue that those two data are very, very different. The difference for me here that is for the NASDAQ, of course, you have a dynamical process, but mostly the rule and the laws of this process are mostly unknown. You don't have fundamental dynamical law that explain the NASDAQ evolution. Maybe some people can argue against that, but what I can tell is anyway, the law that explain the evolution of the market here are far from being similar to the laws that can explain the evolution of the temperature, because the evolution of the temperature, it is based mostly on physical principles. So you have physical principles that explain the evolution of the physical variables, the physical and also the spatial patterns. So you have some very physical laws. So that's why I think it's a good idea to apply machine learning to our system science, but still there are some specificities, and one specificity is of Earth system science is that you have physical laws, you have numerical models. Okay. Now, what about data assimilation? So what machine learning is, how machine learning is related to data assimilation? So I can say here that machine learning and data assimilation are very closely linked. But I won't go too much into detail in that. I give some references where this point is made and where the connection between machine learning and data assimilation are made. And all I could give much more of that. There is a lot of literature on that, but these are more general articles that explain what are the link. And during this the crash course here on Friday, there is a talk that will be more dedicated on the link or how you can use both data assimilation and machine learning. So it's on Friday, next Friday. Okay, this is the end of my first, maybe a bit long introduction on machine learning. I will just have a look. Okay, no much question so far. So we will go now to more technical things. So, okay, sorry. Okay, I don't know what you see here, but I can find my. Okay. Okay, so now, what is machine learning? So the question asked by machine learning is, can we extract knowledge or made some predictions or determine an underlying model using a large amount of data? So basically, you have a base of data, like a base of images. So this is digits that have been drawn by humans. So you have 0, 1, 2 until 9. And the question you can ask is, can I go from this image to give the actual digit that correspond to that image? So this is a machine learning problem. And so machine learning is what you do when you do machine learning. There is several ways of saying the same thing. You go from high dimensional data. For example, the digit, they are 28 by 28 pixels images, to reduced dimensional data. So in case of digit, you have only 10 possibilities. So this is one way to say it. Another way to say it is you go from disorganized data, you have pixels everywhere in the space, to comprehensive information. So you extract information. You want to extract information from data. This is what machine learning does. So the question is, can we teach a machine learning to do that? So machine learning is the aim of machine learning is to do that, to go from incomprehensive and disorganized high dimensional data until comprehensive low dimensional data. So now I will go to some of the definitions that I use in machine learning and that are very important. If you want to talk with people who do machine learning, there are some terms that have a very accurate, precise meaning that you should know. So to start with, you have two different types of problems in machine learning. You have regression problem. So regression problem is you want to determine a quantitative variable from a set of data. For example, you want to determine the price of a building from various predictors. So you know the surface, you know the location, you know which floor is the building, you know the general state of the building, and you want to give an estimate of the price of this building. If you want to do that, you want to predict a quantitative value, which is the price. So this is a regression. Another example, so in earth system science, you want to predict a physical value. You want to predict the temperature, the humidity, you want to predict the pressure, the velocity in the future, giving if you know the past data. So this is a regression. So in that sense, you could say that numerical models that forecast the future of the data. So all those models that you have seen that are used in data simulation, they solve a regression problem because they predict a numerical quantitative value. There is a second type of problem, which is also very useful in a system science, which is classification. So we have already seen this problem because we've seen the cat and dogs problem, and I've shown you also that you can try to estimate the digit from an image of this digit. So here, the value you try to predict is not quantitative, but is qualitative. So besides those two type of machine learning algorithm, you have several type of objectives. So I said two, but there is more than that. So when you do machine learning, you can do supervised learning. So when you do supervised learning, what you are doing is you have a data set which is labeled. So you know for some of the data, you know what you want to achieve. So this is example, for example, for cat and dogs. You have a set of data when you have the image, and you know this image is a cat, another image, this image is a dog, and you have thousands of data like that. And from those images, you try to train the mapping between the image and the label. So this is supervised learning because you tell your machine learning what the machine learning is supposed to do. This is the first type of objective of machine learning. The second type is unsupervised learning. In that case, you have only data, you have unlabeled data, you don't know what you want to achieve with those data. What you can do here is only to extract a useful representation of this data. So you try to extract some what are the inherent properties of this data set. So for example, it has been used for commercial application. You have a lot of data about what the clients do in the supermarket, and you want to determine some typical client's behavior in the supermarket. So you don't know what you will obtain. You just have the data, and you just try to obtain some typical behavior. So there are also something in between supervised and unsupervised, which is semi-supervised. So you have some labeled data, but not all your data are labeled. You have few data that are labeled. So this is semi-supervised learning. And you have another type of objective. So I won't talk too much on that. I won't talk at all on that actually, but it is the type of learning which is used for playing games. For example, it's used for chess, for Go, and for poker, which is called reinforcement learning. So in that case, you don't have a data. You just have an environment with whom you can interact, and the environment give you some reward depending on what action you have done. And you learn from that reward. You learn what is the best action to be done. I see there is a message on the chat. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm not very good at Zoom actually. Okay, I cannot see the chat, so yeah. Okay, so there is a question: isn't supervised learning the same thing as neural networks? So to answer this question, basically the answer is no. This is not the same thing, because with neural networks is like a type of machine learning model, and with this type of machine learning models, so neural network, you can do supervised learning, but you can also do unsupervised learning. So neural networks, they are only an implementation of a model. I will talk about the model later on. And you can do both supervised learning, unsupervised learning, reinforcement learning with neural networks. So neural network is just a particular implementation of a machine learning model. And I think it will be clearer later on. And also, that you can do also supervised learning with other things than neural networks. Like, I will give an example later on. So I'm just going forward now. Okay. Hope that answer the question. So now let's go to more formal things. So what is, it's called machine learning. So you have a machine somewhere. So what is a machine? This machine is a model. So it's a model. So a model that gives you an output, which I have denoted here, Y. So the output Y depends on some input X and some parameter theta. So I guess you can see here, this is a very general formulation, a very simple one. You give to a model an input X, you have some parameters in this model, theta, and this model compute an output Y. And what is machine learning, actually, is you have a set of data, X or X and Y. You have a set of data, some examples of the data you want to use in your system. And you just optimize theta, such as the output of the model. So Y is the best is the output you want to achieve. So what are the ingredients of that? So of course, if you want to optimize this theta, so you want to have the best theta, to have the best model, you need some data. So if you have X and Y, it means that you have some example of X and corresponding output, so you do supervised learning. If you have only X and you don't know the output Y, you do unsupervised learning. And if you have X and sometimes Y, this is semi-supervised learning. So you need, first ingredient, it's like a recipe, cook recipe. First ingredient is data. The second ingredient is an objective. What you want to do. If Y is a quantitative variable, so if Y is a number, a real number, for example, this is a regression. But if Y is a class, this is a 0, a 1, 2, 3, this is classification. So the second ingredient is the objective. The third ingredient is the model, the machine, the computational architecture. So this is where neural networks come into the game, because you can choose any model you want. You can choose a linear model, you can choose non-linear model, you can choose random forest, neural network. So you have to choose your computational architecture. Of course, the result will depend on this choice. If you do linear model, you will only have outputs that are linearly dependent on the input. And if you do neural networks, you will have a non-linear dependency between the input and the output. And the last thing you need is a learning process. You have to know how, from the data, from the objective, and from the model, how you will optimize those theta. Most of the time you have multidimensional data also. So this is more a slide to give you some vocabularies and terms that are used. So when the data is multidimensional, you have the input X and you have most of the time a one-dimensional target Y. So the different dimension of the data X, they are called features. So for example, if you have in input the temperature, the humidity, or the salinity, if you are in the ocean, each is one column and each is a feature. And you have samples. So samples is another word for examples. You have some data. So this, for example, if you have one image from 2020, that will be one sample. One image for 2010, it will be another sample, etc. So this is just to clarify the word I will use later in this course. So let's just give a very simple illustration, a bit theoretical, but still I hope it will help to understand. So this is the data I have. Let's say I have those data. So there are I have two data, X and Y. Each of them are one-dimensional. So they are scalar data. I have a data X. So this is the X here on the X-axis and the Y. Okay. So here, the first thing I can say is I have some example of the Y, and okay, what I want to do is to predict the Y from the X for any X, even the X that for which I don't have data. So the first thing I can say is that I have a label here. I have labels, so I know for each X, I know what is the expected Y. So this is supervised learning. First thing I can say. Second thing I can say is Y is obviously quantitative. This is not a class here. This is a numerical value. So the second thing is we here in the regression. Okay. So now I should give an objective. So what I want to do is to predict a Y which minimize the square error. So the difference, the square of the difference between what I predict and what is the label. So this is my objective. I need a model too. So this is the third ingredient. I have data, I have an objective, I need the model. So I will choose here a linear model. So I will just say that the Y, the output of my machine learning algorithm will be theta1 times X plus a bias theta0. So this is a very simple model, but a very efficient model. And actually, this is the first model you should try anytime, this linear model. So I have two parameters, theta1 and theta0, and I've told you the first ingredient is a learning process. So the objective is to optimize those theta1 and theta0 to have the best theta1 and theta0. So here's the best theta1 and theta0 to minimize these square roots. So this is a linear regression. And if you derive all the if you do the math, so if there's several ways to do that actually, but if you do the derivative with respect with all the parameters, you set the derivative to 0, you resolve the linear system, and you obtain this equation here, this formula that gives you the best theta, and it depends on the input X and the output, the label output Y, and you have the best model. Given that the model is linear and given that you try to minimize the square root. And for example, in that case, if I just draw the model, I have this linear, nice linear model. So I have two parameters, theta1, which is 2.124 here, and theta0, which is minus 0.143. And you see that I have now a model. So for any X, I can predict a value. Okay. So I will do a short check at the questions, if there are some. Okay, yes, this is an interesting question. So the question is, can we talk about supervised and supervised learning in a regression task where we do not have categories, but numerical outputs, or supervised and supervised is only for classification problems? Okay, so there is debates on that actually, but yeah, personally, I find that these unsupervised and supervised are in some extent a bit artificial. And so, yes, you can consider that there are unsupervised regression problems. So for example, this is which is called the autoencoder. So you have numerical data in the input, you don't have output, but what you want your machine to do is to reproduce the input. So you have an input X and you have an output also X. So it seems a bit dummy to do that, but the magic here is that between the two you have which is called a bottleneck. So you try to concentrate all the information. So X is high dimensional. So the input and the output are both high dimensional. and you want to concentrate the X into a low-dimensional representation in the middle of your model. So you can consider that autoencoder are unsupervised regression learning. But it's true that most of the easy example or the most understandable example of unsupervised learning are for classification problems. That is true. But yeah, I would have to go more into that to really make you understand what is autoencoder. But I will mention it at the end of the talk. Hope it answers the. Okay, there is a question. Oh, when you explain the linear model, it looks like a Kalman filter. Yes, Kalman filter is also linear regressions. You can express Kalman filter as linear regression, and actually yeah, this is a good time to say that data assimilation for me is not only for me. You can demonstrate that data assimilation can be considered as a type of machine learning algorithm. You have data, you have a learning process, you have an objective, and you have a model. So data assimilation fulfill completely the machine learning ingredients I have just say here. So yes, machine learning data assimilation is a machine learning process. And Kalman filter, yes, this can be seen as a linear regression. Okay, let's. Okay, and yeah, so there's no difference, except that maybe machine learning is much more general. You can do machine learning on things that have nothing to do with data assimilation, but. Okay, let's go back to the slides. So now, by this example of that on linear regression, I've showed you that you can design a model. You can choose a model that predicts an output that minimizes the quantity given some data. So now I will take on maybe the most important point of machine learning. So how can I choose the best model? I know that I can optimize the parameters of the model, but I need to choose the model. So let's say I want to do the same thing as before, but instead of doing a linear regression, I do a polynomial regression. So this is basically the same as before. So this is a generalization to what I've done before. Here you predict your y as a combination of the input x, but with several powers up to the power d. So here I have a polynomial regression of a d polynomial. So the order of polynomial is d here. So if I do that, I can do a linear regression if I chose d to be 1. So here, well, okay, the data are a bit different than before. So this is the data I have. So this is the x, this is the y. I also want to minimize the square root. So I want to predict the y given the x. And this is the model I have if I choose a degree of 1 for the polynomial. This is the model I have now if I choose a degree of 3. Okay. And if I choose a degree of 30, this is the model I have. So I have 3 models. And the question is, what is the best model? So just a quick remark here. What is the objective of having a model is to be able to predict the output y for any x that are new, not only the x that are in the data set that I already know, but for some other x. So that's why I drew a line here, because for any x here, I'm able to predict the y. So this is the objective. And the question is, okay, what is the best model? So I've seen yesterday Laurent did a small game, so maybe we can try that. So in your opinion, but it's maybe more easy here. It's easier. I don't know. What is the best model here? Is it obvious or not? So what would you say that would be the best model here? You can say a few things in the chat if you want. Okay, I'm quite happy because everyone agrees that the degree 3 is the best model. So, but why do you? How can we know that? Of course, here you can look at the model. So maybe you see it's smooth, it's beautiful, it's go through the line. So you can have some qualitative reason to say that it's the best model. But I have to say that we would like to have objective reason to say that degree 3 is the best model, and also that most of the time you cannot plot the model like that because both the input and the output are in a high dimensional space. So you need objective reason to say that degree 3 is the best model. So I just come back to what I said. What is objective of the model is to predict data that I don't know. Yes. So what to do here is to evaluate the result of the model on an independent data set. What by independent, I mean a data set that has not been used to determine the best weights. So what we can do in our example is we have X and Y, and we can just split this X and Y in two data sets. We can have a data set which is used to train the model. So train the model, I mean just determine the parameter of the model. So I just note that X train, Y train. So this is a first part of the dataset which is used to determine the best coefficient, the theta. And the last part are the validation dataset, which is used to compute the score. So what is the best model? So for example, what model has best correlation or the mean square error? So generally, we say that we need more data for training than for validation. So here in the gray dots are the training dataset, the red dots are the validation dataset. So basically, you have two things to determine. I will come back a bit to the last slide. So you have the theta to determine, so which are determined by the training process. So when you have the dataset, you know how to determine the theta. And you have a D to determine, and this is a choice you have to make before optimizing your model. So if I can summarize that, you use this first dataset to determine the parameter of the model, and you use the validation dataset to determine among all the possible models, so all the possible D in that case, all the possible degrees, which is the best. And so here I just plot the same result as before, but in the same plot. Here in orange you have the degree, so in blue you have the degree 1, so the linear regression. In orange the degree 3, so the polynomial of degree 3 regression, and in green the polynomial of degree 30 regression. So they are all fitting the training data, but the red dot here has not been used to determine the theta, not been used to determine the parameter of the model. So if you just look here at the score, so I said the objective was the mean square, so I will look at the mean square error for the training data set. So the black gray dots here. You see that the more you increase the degree of the polynomial, the best the model is regarding this score. So if you just look at the training score, basically you would say that the degree 30 is the best model because it fits better on the training data set. Okay, but now if you look at the score on the independent data set, so the validation score, you see that you have a better score from degree 3, and you have quite not so good score with degree 1 and 30. So this is very, very important. So this is a standard approach in machine learning here. So you optimize your parameters on a training data set, but you estimate your score on a validation data set, because the validation data set, these are examples that are not used to optimize the parameters. So they represent what you want to achieve with your model. They represent, in some ways, they represent new data. What would give the output of the model with new data? Yeah, so there are, okay, I will come back to the comment on the chat, which are all very, very good. And so, okay, sorry. And so, of course, I have just taken an example of 1, 3, and 30, but you can do that, this exercise, you can do that for all the polynomial degrees up to 30, for example. And you see that when you increase the polynomial degree, you decrease all the time your score on the training data set. So the complexity of this is also, it can be said that the more the model is complex, the best score you have on the training data set. But you see that you also start to decrease the validation data set by increasing the degree of the polynomial up to a certain point. And when you continue to increase the polynomial degree, then you start to decrease the score on the validation data set. So this is very, very important. This is a classical result in machine learning. So what you do, so there is actually, we can divide this is the model complexity. You can divide it in 3 regions. So the first region, when you have both bad score for training and validation, the region where you have good score for training but bad score for validation, and the region when you have both good score for training and validation. So the region when you have bad score for both training and validation, they are region when you are underfitting the data. So you're not fitting the data at all. You don't fit the data well enough to detect the underlying model of your data. So this is the case where you have both bad score for training and validation. When you have bad score only for validation, it means that you overfit your data. It means that because you see that there are noise on this data. It means that the model is learning the noise on the data, but you don't want to learn the noise because the noise is different for each new data. So this is called overfitting. This is a major problem in machine learning, overfitting, because we'll see later this afternoon the neural networks. And neural networks, they can be as complex as you want. So you can fit anything with neural networks. So the question here is, are your model able to generalize to new data? And if your model is very good for the data you have, but very bad for new data, it means that your model is overfitting. And I saw that was a remark by Risto, who says that you just say overfitting. Yes, this is overfitting. This is what you see by overfitting. And there is a lot of way to fight overfitting, and this is most of what you do when you design machine learning process. And the first way to fight overfitting is to use validation score to define your best model. Okay. So yeah, and the third region, when you have both good score for validation and training, of course, this is a good fit. So here we have an underfitting situation. You see that you don't recover the model does not reproduce well the variability of the data. Here you have overfitting when the model reproduces noise on the data, which is not meaningful because you cannot generalize to new data. And here this is a good fit when you reproduce the variability of the data, but you are able to generalize well to new data. I think I will stop here. I will just answer a few of the questions here. So there is a question of cross-validation. Yes, so I won't have time to talk about cross-validation, but these are the next slides. So I will talk a little bit about cross-validation this afternoon. And there is the question by Mosan, how much data points are required to develop the model? Any minimum limit? Yes. If I knew the answer, if only I knew this answer, but okay. The answer shortly is it depends on the model, it depends on the data, it depends on what you want to achieve. So I can do maybe one quick comment on that. Generally, it was said that you will need more data than parameters to estimate, which seems to be reasonable. So for example, here I have more points than the number of parameters to estimate in my polynomial. But precisely with a new deep learning and machine learning algorithm, they have produced a lot of techniques to fight overfitting. So these techniques are called regularization techniques. And with those techniques, you have a lot of machine learning models where there is more parameters than data. So I cannot really answer that. There is no rules. It depends on your problem. It depends on the degree of generalities you want to achieve and the complexity of the underlying process. If the underlying process is linear, you will need less data than if the underlying process is very complex. Can I fight overfitting by training two models in independent data instead of training one time and using the second dataset to check scale? Yes and no. Actually, if I train two models with two different sets of data, and each of the models are with degree 30, you will have both model with overfit. But so it won't be sufficient to compensate overfitting. But if you train an ensemble of model, you can have an idea of a part of the uncertainty of your model. So that can be used in a way to fight overfitting. Of course, if you have an uncertainty estimate, if you have a high uncertainty, it means that you have overfit a lot on this region. But yeah, this is one of the things you can do. But I would say that it's good. It might be good to train an ensemble of models. I think it's good to train an ensemble of models, but it does not. You still have to use a validation dataset. This is something you have to do anyway, because if you don't have the validation dataset, you are in the black. You don't know what your model is doing. Maybe it's overfitting, maybe it's not. You cannot tell. Okay, so there is a question. In slide 23, the plot looks very similar to the one shown by Michael of the observation space, which was nonlinear. Does this indicate that these ML model explore better the observation space than the ENKF that does it linearly? I don't know, because we do a bit different things here. But what I can say is one venue for machine learning actually is to produce nonlinear observation operator. So this is one application of machine learning in combination with data assimilation. You have nonlinear operators that allows to explore the observation space, even if the matching between the state of the model and the observation is nonlinear. But you can still do ENKF with a nonlinear observation operator, I guess. I will maybe let the specialist of ENKF talk a bit more about that. But you can, there is no problem. You can apply ENKF. You could apply ENKF or data assimilation in general. You can apply it with nonlinear observation operator. Is it common to account for correlated measurement error in the learning process? Yes. Yeah, no, it's not. Yeah, that's a very good question. I would say that my feeling is it's not common, but it should be more common, because most of the dataset used traditionally in machine learning, they have no correlation. You take a lot of pictures and they have not obvious correlations. But now people start to think about bias in machine learning algorithms. You may have heard of that bias. For example, there are gender bias in machine learning algorithm, and this can be due to some correlation, a non-correlation. It's very difficult to handle that. If there are some spatial correlation that can be represented like by covariance matrix, that you can quite easily handle that, even though it's not so common. But this is a big problem. So how your data are correlated? What are the bias in general? What are the bias in your data? This is a problem. So basically, to make it short, machine learning, they will only train what they are, what the data, what are in the data. So if there are bias, if there are correlation in the data, machine learning will train all that. So sometimes this is something you want, sometimes this is something you don't want. Yeah. Can I find? Yeah. Okay. So I think I have answered all the question here. And I would say that maybe it's a good time to have a break, right? And to reconvene at 1. What do you think? Yeah, I guess that's fine. It's up to me.
Like a good idea.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's have a break and let's just meet again in 50 minutes or so. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Thanks everyone. But you can continue to ask questions in the chat if you want. Maybe not in the chat, but in the Markdown file. Yeah.